You're listening to a podcast from the BBC World Service. This is Hardtalk with me, Stephen Sackur. Thanks for downloading this edition of the programme. I do hope you enjoy it. Welcome to Hardtalk on the BBC World Service with me, Stephen Sackur. The battle for Britain's future is hotting up. In just 2 months, voters will decide whether the country stays in or leaves the European Union. Both sides agree the decision will be of momentous significance, not least because it'll shape the country's economic destiny for decades to come. The EU is the world's biggest trading bloc and integrated transnational single market. The UK's political and economic powers that be, from the Prime Minister to the Governor of the Bank of England and a host of corporate CEOs, have expressed alarm about the impact of a Brexit on jobs, investment and growth. But the business community is by no means united on the wisdom of staying in. My guest today is Tim Martin, the founder and chairman of the successful pub chain JD Wetherspoons. He is an unconventional, passionate CEO, the archetypal self-made tycoon who sees opportunity rather than threat in Britain's option to go it alone and leave Brussels behind. But does the British public share his appetite for risk? Well, Tim Martin joins me now. Welcome to Hardtalk.
Thank you very much.
The Prime Minister David Cameron and his team seem to have decided that the economy will be the main battleground for this argument over in or out for Britain in Europe. And the reason they've done it is because they think they have very, very strong arguments on their side. You're a big businessman. You have to accept they're right, don't you?
Definitely not. They're completely wrong on that point. Everyone knows, or should know, that democracy equals prosperity and freedom. You can see that throughout the world. West Germany, far more successful than East Germany. South Korea, far more successful than North Korea. Really good example to chew on is why is North America, same resources, approximately similar population, so much more successful than South America? And everyone has to admit it has been. And the reason, I think, is because of the high level of democracy. A constitution highlights the importance of freedom and democracy. You didn't get that in South America, and a lot of trouble. And what's happening in Europe, and this is the key issue, the overriding issue, is that democracy is slowly being taken away. Just look at Greece. Terrible trouble. They no longer have control over their interest rates or their budgets. Look at Portugal, Spain. Italy's had no growth since the euro started. It's an emerging catastrophe.
Well, you can cut that argument about what's happening in Europe different ways. You can look at Germany, the most successful economy in Europe over the last decade, and that, of course, is at the centre of the Eurozone. But let me just step back a little bit. You know, you chose to answer by not addressing economic arguments, but by saying, actually, this is really about democracy.
No, that's an economic argument.
Well, let's actually look at what the Prime Minister and his team are saying right now. They just issued a report in the Treasury in London which looked at the impact of leaving the European Union in terms of Britain's trade, growth potential, jobs over the next 15 years. And to quote the Prime Minister, the conclusion was that leaving the European Union would leave Britain significantly and long-term poorer.
It's an exercise in deception. The Chancellor has used his great office to produce a highly misleading statement. One of the things he said, which hit the headlines in the press, is that, and he backed it up by saying he was supported in terms by the Bank of England, is that mortgage rates for individual householders would go up if Brexit occurred. And that's because the pound would come under pressure. As a result, inflation would go up. And when inflation goes up, interest rates and mortgage rates goes up. That's what he said. And it's a really important point for the householders of Britain. And he's trying to influence them. It's important to get this point across. When this happened in 2009, the interest rates went down Yes,
frankly,
the pound went
anybody
down.
who predicts interest rates over a 15-year span is in a mug's game. I think everybody would accept that. But what Osborne is focused on, and what you must focus on in your Vote Leave campaign, what Osborne is really focused on is the impact on trade of leaving the European
He's
single
not focused
market.
on that.
Yes, he is.
One of the things.
Well, I don't know if you've read the 200 pages of the report, but they go through. They go through itemised. They go through the implications of Britain establishing a new trading relationship with Europe, and it could be the Norwegian model. The Norwegians basically sign up to the single market, but they have to therefore pay a contribution. They're not members of the European Union, but they get the advantages of the single market. That, according to the report, would lead over 15 years to lost growth of at least 3.8%. The other...
So you're saying that no one can tell where interest rates are going to go over 15 years, but they can tell by looking at Norway how the British economy is going to be worse off.
Norway's the best case.
Path.
As you well know, if you look at the report, that's the best case, because the other case is you either accept a bilateral trade deal with the European Union like the Canadians, that would lead to over 6% lost growth, or you go down the track of just having a WTO trade deal like the Brazilians, the Russians have with the European Union. That would be even more damaging to the UK economy. Now, this is backed by figures. What have you got on your side to rebut it?
The Chancellor, and you've tried to close me down on a very important point that the Chancellor has made, and I'm coming back to you on it first, and then I'll answer your question. The Chancellor said very recently that mortgage rates would go up for the British public if Brexit occurred, because the pound would go down and inflation would go up. When that happened in 2009, the last time, this is the Chancellor of the Exchequer talking, interest rates went down. That was a deception, and I think it was a deliberate lie to frighten people. As regards the Treasury report, it's also an exercise in trying to frighten people. It's taking no account of the fact that outside Europe there will be benefits. It's taken all the costs and none of the benefits, as a lot of economists have said. And because of the fact that we will have more freedom and more democracy, we will be able to forge our own path. So they've taken, for example, according to newspaper reports I've read, I don't have my own large team of economists who can dissect reports.
No, you don't. You just go around accusing the Chancellor of deliberate lying. Do you think that really is the way to conduct this campaign?
Yes. Saying mortgage rates will go up if Brexit occurs.
It is his best prediction based on the weakness of the pound that we've seen, not just because of a Brexit vote, but in the run-up to the possibility of a Brexit vote.
Why then, when the pound was weak in 2009 and inflation went up, did interest rates and mortgage rates go down?
Tim Martin, many people will find it staggering that you, as the chairman of a very successful business, appear ready to contemplate all of the uncertainty that will come with a vote to leave the European Union. Gus O'Donnell, the former chief of the civil service, reckons it would take the best part of 10 years, best case scenario,
it's very difficult
to negotiate all of the trade deals.
Run them so long. But the point you said is that you started off with, I'll be concerned about the uncertainty, or I should be concerned about the uncertainty of Brexit. I think there's far more uncertainty by staying in Europe, because if Brexit occurs and we regain control of our own laws and economy, and at the moment the European Court is supreme. Laws aren't framed by anyone we can sack, they're framed by the European Commission, and our MPs have only 50 votes out of about 750. We will have far more certainty if we regain power for the British Parliament, because we can control events. You can go and see your own MP. You will have democracy. At the moment, we don't have it.
Can I just make a statement of the
you're
obvious?
Interrupting me, and then making very long statements.
Because this is an interview. Let me just state something that's rather obvious.
But
you've built a very successful business, right?
A moderately to good business, yes.
Your business involves what? Best part of 1,000 pubs.
Yes.
Over years, the stock market has regarded you as a great success, and a lot of people have invested a lot of money with you. You've done all of that with Britain inside the European Union.
I don't think it was a European Union when I started, was it? It was more of a common market. It's become a union.
And is it hobbling your business?
Yes, in many respects it is, because we're paying a lot of net money to Europe. We're losing control of regulation in this country, and it's having a sclerotic effect on the whole of Europe, which has to be bad for our business.
Is it? I don't know if you saw it, but the Centre for Economics and Business Research recently wrote a report where they reckon that dairy products are on average 8% cheaper as a result of the single market, sugar 3.9% cheaper, cereals, of course very important for beer, 3.3% cheaper, and alcoholic drinks were estimated to be 3% cheaper thanks to the single market. This is all very germane to your business.
Who's producing these statistics? Everyone knows that the Common Agricultural Policy is designed to protect European farmers, and that actually puts barriers to countries from outside the EU bringing products into the EU. So I'm sure that our agricultural products are higher priced in the shops than if we were outside. So it's very difficult for me to contradict the Lord Gnome you've just named in that report. But it can't be true that by having a common agricultural policy which restricts imports of agricultural products, that it's going to result in lower prices for consumers in Europe. It's got to be fantasy.
It is interesting that you guys in the Vote Leave campaign, you have an enormous amount of self-confidence, because if you look at the range of people who are convinced that Britain leaving the European Union would be bad for the British economy, it would include the majority of FTSE 100 CEOs. Well, those who've declared an interest have, by and large, overwhelmingly said they want Britain to stay. All of the top economists surveyed by the Financial Times newspaper, again, the clear majority say that they're convinced it would be better to stay.
True.
Well, it is true, but you can choose to deny it. The IMF last week said that it would do
severe. When you keep talking.
Well, because I'm trying to give you the list, the litany of people in the field of economics and business who basically say leaving is a terrible idea.
It's simply not true, in my personal opinion. And anyway, we've been here before. This is exactly the argument that was advanced in favour of the euro. The CBI was massively in favour of the euro. The Financial Times, massively in favour of the euro. All the good and the great amongst the political leaders. Tony Blair, Geoffrey Howe, all the Liberal Democrats. It was a great and good thing. And the euro, they ignored the fact that for a currency to work, you've got to have a government. Without a government, it won't work. You've got terrible problems with the euro now, and it defies economic logic. It's not based on economics. It's based on a quasi-religious desire for a transfer of power to a supranational organisation.
If you were in China today, or indeed in the United States, and you were looking at negotiating trade deals with Europe, do you think that Britain on its own carries more clout, or do you think that the biggest trading bloc in the world, the European Union, carries more clout when it comes to leverage and getting what Europe wants?
I think that as an independent country, we could strike better deals than Europe can.
Leverage? You think Britain has more leverage than the European Union?
I think that we've got very good leverage as the fifth biggest economy in the world.
We're a country of 60 million. You're talking about negotiating with China with its 1.2, 1.3 billion
the EU
people.
Hasn't negotiated anything with China. It hasn't got a trade deal.
Well, let me tell you what the don't take it from me. This is what the Chinese say. The Chinese official Feng Zhongping says
1.2 billion.
I think from China's point of view, we don't think that the UK or France or Germany or any single European country can play a global role. But the EU is different. It's the biggest market, biggest trading partner of China. The EU is seen here in Beijing as a major power in the world. If the UK left, it would hurt the UK much more than the EU.
Well, it's very difficult to disagree with a bland assertion such as that. You said America and China. Are Americans themselves going to cede their own democracy to a supranational body like Mexico, Canada, put together into a greater organisation to negotiate things?
Well, the United States is a federal republic. I mean, that's the nature of their governance, that they believe in a federation. That's what they created.
A federation within America. They don't believe in a federation with Mexico and Nicaragua and Brazil and Canada. And that's what, in effect, Britain is being asked to do within the EU. So I think the United States, when they look at it closely, will say it's very important to have democracy within your own country.
Just on the question of specific visions for the future of Britain after a Brexit vote, which you, of course, hope will happen, there is a lot of discussion about whether Britain will do a deal, can do a deal with the remaining members of the European Union to deliver both completely free access to the single market and a new arrangement on migration and the movement of people. So let's take them one by one. Do you believe Britain must have full access to the single market?
I think it needs to have a trading arrangement with its neighbours. So full access to the single market, I think we can negotiate a very good deal. The EU itself, the biggest trading partner with China, doesn't have a deal with China.
Because the greater the access,
the EU doesn't have a deal with America. So you can still trade with countries without a formal deal. And I think we'll be able to reach a formal or informal deal with the EU that's very good. We're the biggest.
Do you? Because the French economics minister just said that Britain will be completely killed. We are the biggest buyers
of champagne in the world. We're one of the biggest buyers of French cheeses. We're a huge buyer of German cars. They sell us twice as much.
Yeah, you're talking about tangible goods. What about services? What about financial services, for example? Deutsche Bank saying that there's no way.
Is this an exercise in interruption?
Well, I don't know. Maybe you don't like questions. I don't know.
I start to answer the question and you interrupt it, so it's fine. That's if you want to do that, that's...
Well, I do want to hear not just about cheese and wine and cars, tangible goods traded between us and Europe. That's fine. But I'm asking you about perhaps more difficult things, like financial services, like the fact the head of Deutsche Bank says that London can forget about being a financial centre for Europe if it's not in the European Union.
Well, the main argument in favour of joining the euro was that if we didn't join, our financial services and the city would be hammered by staying outside. We didn't join the euro, and we've done really well, very well. So when you get these scare stories, they're difficult to contradict, but there's no reason why the city shouldn't continue to thrive and financial services shouldn't continue to thrive outside the EU.
All right, let's talk the free movement of peoples and migration then. One of the most contentious issues for campaigners for Brexit is the idea that Britain has lost control of its borders and it has to reimpose that control and it has to end the principle of free movement of people. Do you believe that that is important for the British economy, to end the free access for European workers into the British economy?
My own view is that the people who have gained access, the countries which have gained access already, that includes countries within the EU and countries like Switzerland and Norway outside the EU, who are also entitled to live here, and it happened before the EU with Ireland, for example, they should continue to be able to come and live here with a passport or with a...
free, unfettered access?
Yes.
Because you're way out of step then with most people in the Vote Leave campaign.
Well, I don't know if I am out of step with most people in the Vote Leave campaign. That's my view of what should happen.
Is that because your own business still uses a lot of migrant labour?
No, it's not because of that. It's because I think that up to now, the numbers of people that have come have been sensible enough. Some people feel
Really?
it's been, yes.
Again, you're way out of step with many of your colleagues in the Brexit campaign who believe that the hundreds of thousands who have come from Poland, Romania, Bulgaria, all sorts of different countries, have fundamentally damaged the UK, and not just the UK economy, but the UK culture.
I don't believe that myself. I think that what's happened up to now has been acceptable. I think, though, that in future we need control over our borders, and if the EU expands further, then it has to be up to the British Parliament as to whether people should be allowed to come here. And I think for the future, like the United States or Australia, we should do it on a point system, not based on where you happen to be born, but based on the qualifications that the people have who want to come here and the needs of the country.
Close to the end, I just want to bring in a slightly different point. You're from Northern Ireland originally, aren't you?
Yes.
So you're more aware than most of the sort of potential centrifugal forces within the United Kingdom. You, I'm sure, are aware that the Scots, for example, in the form of Nicola Sturgeon, the leader of the Scottish Nationalist Party, have said that if Britain as a whole votes to leave the European Union, but the Scots people, when you look at the result, have voted to stay, for her that will be a clear signal that it's time to reopen again the argument for Scottish independence and to have another referendum.
Well, there may be another referendum anyway, and I don't think Nicola has ever refuted the idea of a second referendum. It may arise in a lot of circumstances.
See, William Hague says that voting to leave will inevitably threaten the unity of the United Kingdom. Do you worry about that?
I think myself that if the Scots want to leave the United Kingdom, it's a decision for them. And it's very important that they don't stay in the United Kingdom under duress. So if they do want their own government, then I think probably it's a good thing for them and for the UK if they have it, because I think the principle of democracy is the overriding one.
That's where you started, and that's where I guess we're going to end. Just on that point, you feel so passionately about this. We discussed, and we can argue forever about whether the consensus within business and economics is for leaving or not. But do you ever think that you're putting your personal views before the interests of your employees or your shareholders when it comes to this Brexit argument?
No, I've said in my magazine, this is what I think, but who cares what I think? It's up to you. What do you think? And that's the reality of the matter. I personally think that democracy is needed for the future of humanity. I don't think, unless it's enshrined in individual countries and increased in the future, that the world will survive. It sounds rather dramatic, but you can't take democracy away from people, or it always ends up in trouble.
We'll end with that thought. Tim Martin, thank you very much for being on Hard Talk.
That was an edition of Hard Talk presented by me, Stephen Sackur. For details of our complete range of podcasts and our terms of use, go to bbcworldservice.com/podcasts.